So I think we are going to get started today. Thank you everyone for joining. We are happy you're here today. It's a beautiful afternoon. Enrique has joined us and he will be doing most of the talking today because he is the expert on household hazardous waste. My name is Farah Fatimi and I'll give you a few logistics before we get started today. We are recording this webinar, so we will wait until the end to take questions. And at that time, you can either put your questions in the Q&A and type them, or you can raise your hand and we will try to unmute you so you can ask us your question. We will, again, give you some of the basics. We'll take questions at the end, and I think we'll just go ahead and get started. So we are with Metro's Waste Prevention and Environmental Services. Again, my name's Farah, and we've got Enrique Vargas with us here today. I will introduce him a little bit more. If you're not familiar with Metro, which probably many of you are, we are the regional government of the Portland, Oregon metropolitan area. We serve over 1.5 million people in that area. And we work for the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department. That department is in charge of overseeing and regulating the garbage and recycling in our area. So as part of that, we have an effort to keep toxic and hazardous chemicals out of our garbage and our recycling system as much as we can, as well as to deal with them properly. We have to, as a government, we're in charge of that. So we'll talk today about how you can deal with some of your hazardous waste in a way that is really better for your health and the environment. So when we talk about hazardous waste, it's really waste that contains chemicals that are going to pose a risk to either human or environmental health. And that can be lots of different kinds of things. So you see some examples here on this truck. It can be in solid form, liquid, gas, or both, right? Lots of different things that can fall into this category that you would encounter at the store. And we can take simple steps to reduce the impacts of these hazardous chemicals. So today we'll really be going over how to identify what's in your home that is hazardous or could be hazardous. And how do you package it up for disposal to take it in and properly deal with it? As well as at the end, we'll kind of talk about some tips to reduce usage of hazardous chemicals in your home as well. And actually, I would love your thoughts on how we can, as communities, do that together. So what does the life cycle of hazardous waste look like? Well, we are oftentimes buying products, right? Maybe we're buying fertilizers for our lawn, or we're buying paint to put on our homes, right? Or we're using ink in print shops. We are generating this waste that oftentimes needs to be dealt with as hazardous waste. So some of that waste can either end up in recycling, it can get treated, or it can be disposed of in a landfill. But hazardous waste needs to be dealt with in a way that is different than regular recycling or garbage, right? And the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is the one that really regulates the way that we deal with hazardous waste. So the EPA is in charge of really regulating the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, which was passed in 1976. So if you think of 1976 as really the first time that we properly started to deal with hazardous waste, it's really kind of a new thing. And they have authority to control hazardous waste from what we call the cradle to the grave. So the cradle is really like when you're taking the raw materials to create the products that you're using, right? So the raw materials that you may need for the fluid that goes in your car as a coolant, right? And then the grave means when that coolant gets disposed. So under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, we have to dispose of these chemicals so that we're minimizing the environmental and health impacts of them. So oftentimes they end up being packaged or treated in a way that is going to do that, and they get put in a landfill oftentimes if they're not recycled. And these landfills oftentimes have particularly designed liners that are going to minimize the leaching out of the chemicals that are problematic. So even though we use hazardous waste, we have ways to minimize the impacts of that waste. But as well, we can think of, other ways that maybe we don't need to buy some of the stuff quite as much as well. So waste is identified as hazardous if it has some of the following characteristics, whether it's flammable or ignitable, corrosive, which means that, it may be able to eat the material on your t-shirt away or even your skin away, right? Whether it's reactive. So in some of the past seminars, we talked about the fact that bleach is really reactive with certain compounds. And even though it's something that you may use around in your home pretty often, if there's anything left in those containers, it does need to be dealt as hazardous waste because it's reactive with a lot of different chemicals. And then we look at the toxicity as well, which basically is just the ability of that chemical to cause harm to living things, including us. So we are going to go over some examples of hazardous waste. Enrique is going to take us through that, and then some of the logistics around taking your hazardous waste in, and then some awesome stories or really interesting stories from the hazardous waste facilities. Enrique had been working for a very, very long time as a hazardous waste technician at Metro, and I'll let him tell you more about that.
Hello, everybody. My name is Enrique Vargas. Can you all see me? All right. And like Farah says, I have been with Metro for about 16 years now. 15 of those years I worked with the hazardous waste team. And so I do appreciate your time, and I'm really excited to share some stories with you. So thank you. So what are examples of hazardous waste that are found in your home? And, my answer is basically anything that most of us will keep under our sink, maybe in our garage, to work on our vehicles, any kind of cleaning products, pesticides, anything like that. So, paint is the big one. That's about 50% of what our facilities receive. Most of that is latex paint, but we're taking things like stain, roofing tar, car paint, which are very dangerous for not just you, but for the environment. A lot of solvents in there. And what's really interesting about the paint that we collect is that it's actually sent to a Metro facility on Swan Island, where it is sorted by color. It is filtered, blended, repackaged, and resold at a discount. And I think it's really incredible because not only are we giving something a second life, we're also giving people jobs in the community. And one of the interesting facts about Metro Paint is that if you were to go buy paint at a hardware store, you pay anywhere between $100 to $125 for 5 gallons. You could go down to our Metro Paint location or to your closest Miller store, and you can pick up a gallon of Metro Paint from anywhere between $10, $15, and a 5-gallon can run anywhere between $40 and $50. So not only are you doing a good thing for the environment and you're in the community, you're also doing something good for your pocketbook. So I do encourage you, if you have any questions or interested in that. Here's a good picture of the processing facility. And you can see what they're doing is they're actually using can openers that are designed to open up large cans of food in maybe industrial kitchens, cafeterias, things like that. They'll open the can up. We'll take a look inside and make sure that it actually is paint. You can see the mixers or the little blenders hanging down from the yellow hoses from the ceiling. They'll actually give that a nice stir and then they'll just dump it into the pot, the white pot, the blue pot, the brown pot. And for the longest time, this paint was all mixed by eye, which was really fascinating that the staff down there was that skilled, where they could blend multiple batches and they could come out within a certain tolerance by eye. And now the technology has grown and has improved, and now we're using computer technology to even increase the quality of not only the color, but the filtration process has dramatically increased, which for the longest time there was a reputation that Metro paint could not be sprayed, and that is not true. Metro paint is perfect to go in a commercial sprayer. So just another way to apply that paint to your structure. Yes, let's see, batteries. Yes, this is another very common product that we see at the household hazardous waste facilities. And there are a number of types of batteries out there. And as technology evolves, we're starting to see new types of batteries. For the longest time, it was mostly alkaline batteries, which your basic AA, AAA. We do see batteries like such as NiCads, nickel metal hydrides, and other batteries like that, which are fairly common. And what we're starting to see more of are lithium batteries. And the thing about lithium batteries is they're really great for batteries because they do offer a lot of energy, but at the same time, they can be very dangerous. Even when they are maybe depleted to where they cannot be used in the device you're trying to operate, there's still stored up energy in those batteries. And we've seen fires in vehicles. We've seen smoke and fires at our facility, small fires from these batteries, from lithiums in particular. So my recommendation to you is if you are using lithium batteries, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with them. But when you are done with them, I would recommend isolating the terminals. And this is something you could do with maybe packing tape. We don't recommend that you use duct tape, but like clear packing tape is a great way to do this. Or you can also put them in little plastic bags. And that way, individually, because we don't want those terminals to touch. But that's a great way for one to store those until you bring them to us. And two, that's how we have to ship them. So we go through every battery sorted by hand, and we'll separate them by what type of battery they are. And the more dangerous batteries are taped or packaged before we can send them off. One cool thing about the alkaline batteries is those are collected and they are sent up to Seattle, and they are taken to a smelter where they're making I-beams and rebar. And so the batteries are actually combined into making those new products. And so again, one of the things that I'll always focus on is not only doing a good thing for the environment, we're also giving people jobs. There's people sorting the batteries, and also those people that are delivering the batteries, and then the folks in the smelter. Fluorescent bulbs, fluorescent tubes, fluorescent bulbs. That fluorescent bulbs they come in many different shapes and sizes. One of the most common varieties you'll see here, I call them the pigtails or the little corkscrews. These are all very fragile, so we ask that you take extra special care of these. For some reason, people love to put their light bulbs with their battery containers. And what happens is when those batteries are brought and the light bulbs are brought to us, a lot of times those batteries are really heavy and they'll actually break the bulbs. And there's a couple issues there. One, the mercury in the bulb is dangerous for you, your family, your car, your vehicle, your household. So we want to keep that mercury inside the bulb. But if we prevent them from breaking, that's one way to do that. Two, the other issue with the broken bulb is that once that bulb is broken, we can no longer recycle it. So it's kind of defeats the purpose of bringing it to us. Now, is it going to happen? Absolutely, and that's okay. But at the same time, if we can take good care of these bulbs while we're storing them at home and waiting to bring them to us, and while they're being brought to the facility, we would really appreciate it. And it's better for you, and it's actually better for the technicians. These bulbs actually, you'll see the corkscrews here, but we also take the circles, the U's, and the tubes as well, up to 8 feet. Electronic devices. I'm sure we all have a couple cell phones laying around, maybe an old broken laptop, anything like that. Televisions. So it's a little different. I'm going to take a step back. Cell phones are collected at the household hazardous waste facility, and they're actually routed to charities who there's recycle value in the phone. So instead of Metro taking that responsibility on and trying to make a few dollars on recycling the phones, we would much rather hand those phones off to charities. And there's a little more legwork on their end, but they also recoup the financial benefits of the phones being recycled. So we'll also take the cords, the batteries, of course, that come with the telephones, and then the transfer station itself will also accept televisions, computers, mice, speakers, printers, things like that, and that's all covered under the Oregon e-cycle program. So, next slide here. So non-empty aerosol cans. So this is an interesting one. So aerosol cans, right off my top of my head, I think of spray paint. I think of roach killer, ant killer. I think of oven cleaner. I think of things like shaving cream and other cleaning products in the home. So there's a couple different rules around aerosol cans. And I'd like to start off by saying, if for whatever reason you're not sure, you can either call us or you can always bring them to the facility. We'll help you make the decision. But empty aerosol cans, things like paint and shaving cream and more I would call innocent household cleaners, as long as those cans are completely empty, they can go right into your curbside recycling. Now, each hauler is different, so ultimately it's the hauler's decision if they're going to take those empty containers. So I would recommend, if you have any questions, to contact your local hauler on that, but we're always here if you have questions as well. The more dangerous materials that come in spray cans, maybe things like the roach killer and the oven cleaner and things like that, we would really like to see those containers at the hazardous waste facility if they're empty or if they are full. And I know this is a little confusing, and I'm sorry if I'm confusing everybody. So I'm gonna take a step back and say any aerosol containers that have materials in them should come to the household hazardous waste facility. Empty containers of things like pesticides or oven cleaners, even though they're empty, they should probably still come to the household hazardous waste facility. Empty cans of spray paint, shaving cream, and basic household cleaners can probably just go into your curbside recycling. I'm sorry for the confusion there. At any time, if you do have any questions, one of the things I like to remind folks is the RIC is a wonderful, wonderful resource. That's the Recycling Information Center, and we're going to go ahead and post that phone number here at the end of this at the end of the session here. And if you ever have any questions, please contact them, and they will make sure to help you answer those questions. So I apologize for the confusion. So what can you bring to the household hazardous waste facility? Like I said, here's the list. There's a little bit of everything there. What I like to say is what's easier for us is to say is what can't you bring to the facility? And really that what you can bring to us are large amounts of asbestos, and some materials that are used and are generated, some hazardous materials that are generated from businesses. But other than that, as long as it's created or generated coming from a home, and it's not a large amount of asbestos, 9 times out of 10, you're gonna be able to bring that to the facility. And even if we don't take that material at the facility, we're gonna help you find a place for it to go. So that's one thing about all the technicians at the facilities. They're all very helpful, and they understand that you as a customer and as a community member are taking the time to help us collect all these materials. So I guarantee you everyone down there will go out of their way to help you find a home for the materials you have. And this is a great question. How do I prepare my load? We have seen some pretty crazy stuff at the transfer station, and you'll see 2 pictures in front of you. The top picture is how we recommend you do not bring the materials to us. Everything's been thrown in the truck. It's upside down. You can only imagine on the way from the house or wherever that material was being picked up from to the transfer station, the hazardous waste facility, that stuff is slid all around the pickup truck. There's glass containers there, so glass will break. We all know that. Me doing this for so long, I can look in that pile and I can see diazepam, I can see malathion, I can see paint thinner, I can see heavy metals. I can see all kinds of really, really nasty chemicals. And I'll tell you, a lot of those pesticides are no longer available. They're so nasty. So I want to look at the bottom picture, and that's a way better representation of how we like to see materials coming to us. Single layer, upright. Boxes are great. You know, a lot of the times the customers really like to use bags, and if you want to use a bag, that's a great idea, and we totally encourage that. But what I would recommend doing is actually lining the box with the bag and then standing everything upright. So if a container does break, which happens because a lot of this stuff is old, you know, maybe it leaks a little bit. We don't want that leaking in the vehicle. So if it's going to leak, it's going to leak in the bag, and then it probably won't leak through the bag, and then the box is a secondary layer of protection. So there's also things to be worried about, such as reactions. You know, certain chemicals don't like each other, and when they mix, they'll generate heat, they'll generate gas, they'll generate smoke, fumes, and fires. We've actually seen fires at the hazardous waste facility from customers bringing in materials very similar to what you see in the top picture, or they'll take one of those big, large contractor bags and just throw everything right into the bag itself. And then the other thing we see a lot of are people using old garbage cans, and they'll just kind of throw everything in the garbage can. And just like everything in the top picture, those tops will work loose, containers break, and by the time we unload those garbage cans, we're seeing a big, you know, 2, 3, 4 inches of just this toxic soup in the bottom. And that's something that those technicians will have to clean up. And we just like to avoid that if at all possible. So yes, make sure things are sealed. You know, Ziploc bags are a great way to do that. Like we said, isolate the terminals on your batteries, upright single layer. You know, I want you to think very carefully about what you're sticking in the same bin. You know, things like pool compounds are notoriously dangerous. You know, there's a lot of heavy oxidizers that we're seeing in those products. So we'd recommend that you keep those separate. You know, we're always taught about the fire triangle as kids, and that's ignition source, fuel, and oxygen. And the funny thing is, if you have a strong oxidizer right next to something flammable like brake fluid or maybe like a gasoline or something like that, you really don't even need an ignition source. It'll smoke and fire on its own. And there's some really horrible stories, especially with pool compounds that we're seeing out there, with mixing with. The last one I heard was it was brake fluid on a rag, and it was in the back of a vehicle right next to some oxidizer pool compound, and the vehicle caught on fire. So we do not want to see that happen. You know, we care about you. We appreciate you. We're partners. We're teammates. We're all trying to tackle this problem together, and we want to make sure everybody's safe while they're doing this. The last thing, that last picture you'll see on the bottom is a family tarping. We call it tarping a load. And this is, you know, for hazardous waste and with garbage. If you're using a pickup truck or a trailer, maybe, the last thing we want happening is for you to get out on the freeway and that material start to fly out the back of that trailer or that pickup truck. So we recommend that you actually tarp your load and then tie that down with tie downs or bungees of some sort. It will actually, it's one of those things where if you show up to the facility with garbage, not tarped, they actually charge you more for your load as well. So not only is it a safety issue, we're trying to save you a few dollars for your pocket. So next slide, please. Oh, yes. So we were talking about the Recycling Information Center earlier. That's the RIC. And this is a team of Metro staff. They work 6 days a week, and what they do is they answer phone calls about garbage, recycling, reuse materials, household hazardous waste, and these guys are amazing. We work very close with them as household hazardous waste technicians, but they are the front line to answering the community's questions. What they'll do is you give them a call, and you'll say, hey, for example, I've got a mattress to get rid of. What they're going to do is they're going to ask for your address or your cross streets, and then they're going to offer you a number of options based on where you're located. Because we don't want you driving across town if you don't have to, and we don't want you paying a lot of money if you don't have to. You know, our job isn't to we're not a revenue stream for Metro. You know, we're not here to generate money. We're here to offer a service, and we're here to hopefully save the community money. So even if you have something that you can recycle, and it can go to another facility, and that means that we're not going to capture that revenue, we're okay with that. We're more concerned about that material finding a proper home and proper disposal on the back end. So you'll see that number there, 503-234-3000. I'm sure you've all seen the commercials or heard the commercials on the radio. And I encourage you, next time you have a question or you're coming to see us at the facilities, maybe give them a call if you're not quite sure, because they might be able to save you a trip and they might be able to save you a little bit of money at the same time. So next slide, please. So what happens when you come to the hazardous waste facility? So you'll pull up in your vehicle and you'll see approximately anywhere from 4 to 6 technicians hopefully waiting for you to wave you up and have you pull up into the driveway. You know, we do ask that you listen to the technicians, depending on what you have and the workflow of the site that day. They either might ask you to come out of your vehicle and help us unload, or they might ask you to stay in the vehicle. And there's lots of things that contribute to this decision. Maybe there was a load that came for you and they'd spilled a little pesticide on the ground. So one, is it not only slippery, but two, it might be kind of stinky and they don't want to expose you to that. So it's really important, as they wave you up, you listen to the instructions. We'll go ahead and get your trunk opened or your door opened. And even with COVID, we're still out there helping customers. The team will unload the materials from your car and they'll begin their general sort. Everything has its place. And hopefully when you show up, you'll be able to see them in action. So, yeah, they'll go through that sorting process. Here's a picture of one of our tables, and you can just see all the varieties of batteries. I mean, I'm seeing maybe 8 or 10 different types right there. And underneath this table, there's probably another 6 or 8 types of batteries. So everything is sorted by hand. If they need to be taped, they're taped. If we have materials that come in that we're not sure what they are, the example I always give is maybe you had a renter and the renter moved out and they left a bunch of stuff in the garage, and you go clean the garage out and there's a mayonnaise jar with the brown liquid in it. And you know, and I know that that's not mayonnaise, but we just can't open it up and sniff it. You know, we do not want the public doing that. That's the one thing. We don't want you sniffing it. We have the ability to test. So what we ask you to do is bring that material to a safely upright single layer. We actually have a lab on site, and we can go through, and based on how the material reacts to water, how pH is, and sometimes how it reacts to a flame, we can determine. I can say that material is flammable. I can never say that it's gasoline, but knowing that it's flammable allows us to make the determination that it will go in with the other flammable materials, and it allows us to safely dispose of that, categorize and dispose of that material. So we do have a couple options. Let's see here. We have Metro South down in Oregon City, and we also have Metro Central up in Northwest Portland. I'd like everybody to pay attention. It's interesting because South is the household hazardous waste facility is open 7 days a week at Metro South, whereas Metro Central is closed on Sunday, and I'd hate for somebody to go down there with their waste and not be able to drop it off. So I want to let everybody know that the hours are different for the sites, and at the same time, the transfer station, which the hazardous waste facility, which operates on the same properties as the transfer station, those two facilities also have different hours. So you might be able to drop off your garbage at Metro Central, but the hazardous waste facility might be closed because it's too early or too late. So if you are going to make a trip down there, I'd recommend that you check the website and make sure you got the hours correct. And again, you can always call RIC and they'll be able to give you the most up-to-date and accurate information. Yeah, so here's a couple pictures of reactions that have happened at the household hazardous waste facility, and this is what happens when two chemicals mix that aren't supposed to mix. The one on the right, you can see that was a reaction that generated a bunch of foam. So what happened is we were combining materials that were in 2 drums, and there couldn't have been more than maybe a couple gallons in each drum. And when we added these together, it expanded, there was heat generated, and it ended up with this. This was the end product. And so fortunately no one was hurt in this incident, but what it did is it gave us this great picture just to illustrate how dangerous the materials that we're working with can be, and how important it is to label materials when we're using them. both of these the one on the right hand side, both of the drums that we combined came in with no information on the drums. So even though we tested them, this still happened, and it doesn't happen a lot, but it does. And then you can look on the left side. Here's another picture of when a drum, basically a drum built up pressure. So there's two drums on the left-hand side. You can see on the bottom left, there's a drum with a little, we call it a web on top of it. And you can see where the drum started to bulge. And again, that's because there was two incompatible materials in the same drum, which happens. And the reason we put that net on top of that lid is because those lids will build so much pressure where they'll actually pop off. And so if that lid was to pop, that net would keep at least the lid from becoming a projectile. If you guys ever come to the facilities, I'd love to give you a tour personally when this COVID's all over. But there's actually, you can see in the facilities where lids have popped off in the facility, and it doesn't happen very often, but you can actually see dents in the HVAC, the ducting, 10 feet in the ceiling, 10 feet up. That just shows you how much pressure builds up inside those drums. So it doesn't happen a lot, but it does happen, and it's very dangerous. So, one way we can prevent this stuff from happening is everybody labeling materials that are going into secondary containers. Maybe they're not original containers, and by keeping things separate, because we'd hate to have this happen to the facility, but we'd really hate to have this happen in maybe your home or your vehicle when you're bringing those materials to us. So this is more on the rare side, but yes, we have the picture on the right. That is the bomb squad. I call it an egg. I'm not quite exactly sure what they call it, but it's a trailer that they'll bring around, and every now and then we'll get some kind of crazy substance, and we'll have to give them a call. And we work very closely with the bomb squad. We'll work very closely with the fire department, the hazmat teams, and we're in constant communication. And it's happened several times where we'll have some chemicals that we know have the potential to be unstable and could either could potentially explode or cause fire or a number of other types of reactions. And so what they'll do for us is the bomb squad will actually come out if we know we have something that's shock sensitive or really dangerous, and they'll come out and they'll put their suits on, and I've seen them do this, and they'll actually load the material up into that egg. And what that egg does is it provides safe transport. It limits the amount of rocking and shaking while that material is being transported. And two, if the material does explode inside that little egg, at least it's contained inside the egg and it's not going to hurt anybody outside of it. So, so many thanks to them. I appreciate what they do for us, and it is a great relationship. On the left-hand side, that's another interesting picture. Those are actually smoke bombs. I don't know if any of you have served in the military. I have not, but these are military-grade smoke canisters. And sometimes these things do walk off the military bases, and they end up with us. And so, again, we have a close relationship with the bomb squad, and they'll either take these materials from us, or they'll actually call in representatives from the military, and they'll come in. Since it is military ordnance, they'll come and collect this from us, and then they have a disposal team on their end. So it's not super common, but it's more common than you think. So sorry about that, Farrah. So next slide, please. So yeah, I think that's Farrah.
All right, great. Well, I just want to give a shout out to Enrique, who was on the front lines for a long time, and for your service there, as well as all of your colleagues that are still out there. They provide us a really amazing service. And, they do a lot to try to prevent all of the things that Enrique was just talking about us, but they put themselves at risk. So we really appreciate them for all the work that they do. So if you want to learn more about what to do with hazardous waste, you can call the number that we gave you before, and we'll show you that again. But you can also go to our Healthy Homes website, and there's a section on hazardous waste. So a lot of the stuff that we are mentioning today, the lists of what we take and how to package it up, that's all on our Healthy Homes website. So I'll be following up with resources such as this afterwards as well. And again, the Recycling Information Center is an amazing resource for you, 503-234-3000.